I'm here. Good morning, everybody. I hope I can be heard. I'm Alison Bowes. I'm Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Stirling, and I've watched this work develop over a number of years, and I am absolutely delighted that it's got to this point and that we're able to put on such a magnificent conference. So welcome everybody. This is session 3A, which is bridging generations. We have a very full programme, so we'll try and keep quite tightly to time. Miriam's already reminded you about the protocol for putting questions in the chat, and we'll pick these up according to the schedule as we go through. So I wanted to just start by saying a couple of things about aging. So Sam is controlling the slides. Perhaps she'll put up there we go. My own research area is aging and dementia, and I just wanted to make a couple of scene setting remarks before we go into the speakers. So one of the very great benefits of the 20th and 21st century is increasing longevity. We all benefit from it. More of us see our grandchildren, more of us enjoy longer, healthier lives, and as well more healthy years before perhaps we experience difficulties at the end of life. So if we're thinking about what healthy aging means, I think a really good definition is that as we age, we can live an independent and fulfilled life, and we can continue to contribute to society. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Sam? Thank you. So how do we achieve this then? Well, there are three things that I would highlight which come from research, some of which are more, some of which are less obvious. Clearly, better physical health is a good thing, and that is certainly being widely enjoyed. But many people often say, despite poor physical health, they actually enjoy a good quality of life. This seems to be linked to their better mental health and the avoidance of, for example, social isolation and loneliness. And the key to this, I would say, from the research record is social engagement, being involved, having relationships, good interaction, a good life in interaction with others. So how can Bridge help then? Well, one of the reasons I've supported this initiative is because I can see from Sam's very eloquent talk about Bridge that Bridge can promote social engagement, the key to enjoying healthier aging. It keeps people active in all sorts of ways, and it brings people together. And I'm sure that the speakers who we're now going to hear from will help us understand how it can do that in a little bit more detail. So I'd like now to introduce the first speaker for this session, who is Dr. Marek Małisa. And Marek is from the Polish Bridge Union and the Council of the Bridge to the People Foundation in Poland. He's going to speak about bridge research with older people and in schools in Poland. So Marek, over to you.
Thanks. So, what is the reason we make research about the game bridge, its effects and advantages over other mind sports? In my opinion, the main one is to get strong scientific arguments for marketing our game in all aspects. So to get more members, more sponsors, to spread information what Bridge gives to the people, and to change perception of our game from card game, which is a bad one, to intellectual game. For me, as mathematics, methodology based on quantifiable and computable data is most valuable. Of course, it's not always possible, especially in so-called humanities and social science, but I consider it possible and necessary. Some 50 years ago, when in Poland we had just 2 IBM computers, 2 in all Poland, I wrote a special program to help this part of science, humanities and social science, and medicine as well, to calculate not relations between not measurable data, and it worked. So from early 2019, Foundation Bridge to the People is cooperating with Nicolaus Copernicus University, now nominated to be a research university, and its Collegium Medicum. So our research is, if not mainly, then at least partially medical one. Complete results you can find on BAMSA webpage. They are titled Bridge Dementia Prevention or Therapy as well, it's one, and how learning to play the game of bridge affects well-being and cognitive skills of elderly. Full text of my writings you can find on the webpage. So now let me present only its main points. The first one is to get more results confirming Professor Diamond's thesis about preventive function of our game. Some 20 years ago, she estimated it as 75% lower chance to get Alzheimer's disease if you play bridge. In my opinion, underestimation. So to confirm, we organized bridge lessons and later play of bridge in 2 welfare houses, where mainly old, lonely, and depressed people are living. Initially, some medical and psychological tests were done, followed by 20 weeks of intervention. Intervention means bridge lessons and then organizing their bridge play. No. We couldn't complete medical tests because of COVID. These welfare houses were closed after COVID started. But some tests we completed, and our findings are the degree of depression was halved in terms of geriatric depression scale. So it's very optimistic. They've been totally down initially. And well-being in PERMA scale increased significantly. And that was pilot research, so we plan to start massive one from September on. Some people suggested that this relation between playing bridge and dementia can be reversed, that playing are those who are mentally in good shape. To check it, if it's true or not, we organized experiment teaching mild cognitively impaired patients of Alzheimer's Center in Warsaw, who initially were not able to count to 10 and hold cards properly. And after 6 months, with 3 hours a week intervention, we found them playing, of course, simple bridge without bidding, counting, taking tricks, adding and subtracting within our 2 magic numbers, 13 and 40. Characteristic for our game. That was first message, and after 1 year, their cognitive ability in mini-mental state examination scale fell more than twice slower in comparison to control group of non-playing mild cognitively impaired patients, more than twice slower. Simple calculations shows that we can be 95% sure that it's not accidental difference, but I'm not sure if statistically it is important, because trouble is that using estimator population parameters cannot be estimated for next research. There was too small and non-random sample group. However, even if it wasn't statistically important for sure, due to above mentioned doubts, professors of medicine, of gerontology and geriatry found it clinically important. In medical research, there are two importances you are calculating, statistical and clinical. The best is if both are important, statistically and clinically. In our small group, we checked it was only clinical importance, which I can confirm for sure. 3 years ago, I spoke with Professor Martin Seligman in USA, being one of the nationals, and he suggested me to concentrate in our research more on mild cognitively impaired patients. Looks like he predicted what will be the effect. Finally, he's one of the best in psychology, histology. We will continue our experiment from September on. In this time, 5 or 6 Alzheimer centers in Warsaw. Everything is ready. We have staff who will do it. One of our staff is 93 years old. It's my father-in-law who will help me in Toruń Alzheimer Center. He will take care about one of the tables with this Alzheimer infected fellows. Unlucky because of COVID situation, effects of 2 years teaching in our 38 schools are still not collected. But pilot research of Agata Kowal from Kraków showed a significant advantage in terms of test results of those who have bridge lessons over the rest of students. Similar results were reported by many other researchers from other countries. Polish Bridge Union will continue this program, Bridge in Schools, because we've got a grant from Ministry of Sport. So in about 40 schools it will be continued, and it will be parallelly with research how it works, what are the differences between results of tests in both. We also plan, still I have some minutes. We also plan to make some immunological research, which was mentioned by Gianrigo Rona in his speech, but for that we need $50,000 US. Coming back to the methodology, a few last words. Our results are suitable for computer statistics calculation. So from marketing point of view, they are sell-able to media and sponsors. And what is very important is to make our results of all our research sell-able to get all these benefits I mentioned at the beginning. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was an example of perfect timing. So we now have a little time for a couple of questions. So there's one quite complicated question in the chat, and part of it is where can people read your results? I know you said at the beginning, could you say that again, please? BAMSA webpage.
So organizer of this conference webpage, and titles of these papers are Bridge Dementia Prevention or Therapy as well, it's one. And second, how learning to play the game of bridge affects well-being and cognitive skills of the elderly. They are quite long, full reports from our research. And in case whoever wants to get it from me, just please email me. I will write on chat my email address to everybody. Whoever wants to contact me is free. I'm available 24/7.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm just looking at the questions here. So the person who asked about the testing and the methods and so on, those are available in the report. So
yes.
It would take a long time, I think, to do all the detail here. So perhaps that's not one we can answer. So also somebody is asking about how the research can benefit the future of bridge by becoming more public.
I'm sure that whoever will get a message that bridge is slowing down or delaying dementia and is able to play will join our community. In my opinion, 95% of bridge players are not members of any NPO. But that's why we should spread our news in media, all kind of media. What we are doing in Poland, thanks to my very good friend Małgorzata Maruszkin, she will probably join our conference, or she's already on. And she's excellent in making publicity.
That question, by the way, came from Mary Egling, and we have a question from Catherine Platt, which says, have you introduced bridge to deaf impaired schools? Schools where people have hearing impairment?
Not yet, but together with Małgosia, we are working on blind people bridge. And probably the next step will be to other disabled people.
Okay, so Catherine is saying that they plan to try, so maybe you need to have a conversation.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Marek. That was a great start to the discussion. And I can see that Miriam is doing her applauding thing and her smiling.
Yes.
So, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Yeah. So we'll move on now to Miriam's presentation. And Dr. Miriam Snellgrove is from BAMSA. She'll be well known to everybody. She works at the University of Stirling with us. And she's going to discuss loneliness and connection, older adults' leisure during a pandemic. So very current. Over to you, Miriam.
Thank you very much, Alison. So yes, I am going to talk and explore a little bit today the ways in which loneliness and connection through the case study of Bridge. And in particular, I am going to look at the ways in which loneliness and connection operate simultaneously, rather than as opposing dichotomies. And this presentation will also highlight how routine, whether that is through regularly playing bridge or other kinds of activities, is an often overlooked but vitally important way of managing everyday life and is particularly crucial during a pandemic. So, this may come as no surprise to many of you here in the audience, and particularly some of the other panelists that are going to be speaking later on, that we are living in a time of increased loneliness and isolation, that governments around the world are recognising that their citizens and everyday people are experiencing acute and rising levels of loneliness. This has only been exacerbated during the pandemic, and increasing studies have been coming out again from various government agencies that have highlighted that the pandemic and the various lockdowns have done nothing but exacerbate loneliness. Indeed, this loneliness is not just something that is experienced by an older generation, but is one that is covering all generations, and all people are reporting increased levels of loneliness and isolation. So this has given rise to a huge amount of interest in research in the fact that we live these lives that are increasingly disconnected, lonely, and socially fragmented. To the extent that recently in the UK, the Welsh Government, for example, put loneliness on their health agenda as seeing it as being more and as acute as obesity and smoking and the health effects that it has on people. And this is even more so the case when we look at the older population. Within the UK in particular, at the start of lockdown and pandemic a year ago, older people, and particularly those most vulnerable and in care homes, were woefully left exposed to the virus in terms of personal and protective equipment, but equally then with the introduction of social isolation measures, again compounded with the fact that health risk as well as isolation became acute issues experienced. And so this has given rise to a real concern that older people are increasingly leading health compromised lives due to the pandemic, as well as increasingly lonely ones. At the same time, however, there is another narrative going on, and that is that we live in an increasingly connected world, that actually, as well as being lonely, we are more digitally connected than ever before. And this is incredibly true when it comes to how this pandemic has come about, that the solutions offered by governments and various age organisations have suggested that they are through the digital connections, through the mapping of the virus, through test and trace, through all of these different kinds of things we can control and suppress the virus, but also get on top of it and find solutions to it. So on the one hand, we're lonely, on the other hand, we are incredibly connected. And this is also true of the shift in how people have ended up working. So the pandemic has changed how people go about work. And for those who could, myself included, the start of the pandemic and lockdowns has meant that for the last 16 months, many of us have been working from home. Not for everyone, obviously, but for a large swathe of the population, we have moved to working from home. And this working from home has also been educating from home. So there has been the combined pressures of not only working, but educating and having various caring responsibilities. And on top of that, we are increasingly leading lives throughout this lockdowns and pandemic and beyond that are online. So we are being shown of the ways that we can manage and live these online digital lives. And in the UK in particular, during the start of the first pandemic, there was a whole emphasis on this person called Joe Wicks, who basically was doing PE online and became a kind of phenomenon. So everybody was stuck and sequestered in their homes, they could still do PE. And nowhere is this kind of move to and the importance of leisure during lockdown and the pandemic, then also with bridge, where this too has flourished, as we have discussed in previous sessions, with the great shift to online and move to online. So what we have here are two dichotomies between loneliness and connection. We are, at the one hand, more connected and yet simultaneously more lonely. So during this polarizing and quite divisive time, we ran the Bridging COVID project that collected over 300 diary accounts from participants around the world that documented how their bridging lives had been affected by the pandemic. I'm not going to talk in great detail here about the methods. Please see my pre-record on Digital Bridge during the pandemic for more information on that. Or if you do want to ask me any questions about the methods and the analysis, pop it in chat. But a key guiding aim here behind our project was to recognise, as Plummer articulates, that writing no longer merely captures reality, but helps construct it. And the reality captured by our participants, is one that complicates easy divisions between online, offline, lonely, and connected. So I want to trouble some of those very simple binaries that people are either lonely or connected. Within our data, what became incredibly clear is that participants are actually both. For example, when it comes to the move to online bridge, participants may be initially resistant to it, but as lockdowns progress and isolation became a more enduring feature of their everyday lives, they would move quite willingly to going online. Alongside this, obviously, the technological platforms would improve, so too would then the interest in learning to play bridge as a way to connect to people and to carry on playing. However, we also have accounts from people who make it clear that they have chosen not to play online and that they also have other leisure activities and hobbies that keep them occupied: gardening, walks, reading, and other kinds of things. And yet we have other accounts where the lack of bridge is a wound from one participant that they prefer not to discuss. However, what is clear, whether people are playing online or not, offline, feeling lonely or isolated, or at some moments feeling overconnected or not connected, suffering from screen fatigue or lack of connection, the accounts demonstrate across the board the importance of routine. The importance of everyday rhythms and routines has long been highlighted by many sociologists as a crucial way for people to manage complex and often time-pressed lives. The start of lockdowns across the globe disrupted everyday routines and rhythms that people had built into their lives. The capacity then to access and engage in new rhythms and routines that were not excessively burdensome and challenging, connected to other care responsibilities, for example, as I highlighted in my previous slide, was something our participants were largely able to do. Being as they were a largely retired population and time rich, with the average age of our participants being over 70, routine and developing routines, whether that was through playing online bridge or developing these other activities, was an important way that they managed the many hours, weeks and months of lockdown and beyond. And you have some examples from the data there that I'm not going to read out, but hopefully you can read while I'm speaking. So this very quick presentation, and apologies I've raced through it a matter of knots, but basically what I'm trying to argue here is that loneliness across the global north and south is increasingly becoming recognised as a serious social and health problem. During the pandemic, reported loneliness amongst all generations, but particularly older people, has grown. This epidemic of loneliness happens alongside the myriad of ways that we are all increasingly digitally connected, this conference, for example, being one. Our Bridging COVID project has shown that bridge, as a serious leisure activity, was a crucial means for many to stay connected and well during the pandemic. However, online bridge was not the solution for everyone, and all participants in various ways spoke about moving between loneliness and overconnection. As a result, rhythms and routines were crucial for managing the long pandemic days and nights. And whilst perhaps not the most interesting solution to tackling loneliness, the importance of routine in the lives of older adults cannot be underestimated. Thank you very much. If you'd like to ask me any questions, please do. And there's some contact information that for both Sam and I. Thank you.
Thanks, Miriam. Brilliant. Little round of applause there. That's really nice. Good. Thank you. So we now have a little time for some questions to Miriam, which have come up in the chat, which I'll field now. So one question for you, Miriam, is how do you think we could get bridge into government social isolation and loneliness agendas?
That's the most impossible question ever. How could we? Well, because I think bridge is, I think that's also what our research has shown, that bridge is one thing of many. I know we're in a bridge conference, and so it's all about the importance of bridge. I think we need to, and this has been spoken about by other people across the conference. I think also Marty and others have mentioned it in their keynotes, is that as researchers, we need to connect with other people who are trying to bring things like other mind sports, whether that's chess, other kinds of active mind sports, together collectively to get onto government agendas, perhaps to highlight the important nature of what it does to people, for people. I don't know if that really answers the question. I feel that was a considerable fudge. I could be really mean and go and ask my co-author if they would like to add anything to that. But I think she'll kill me, so maybe not.
Given that I asked the question.
You see, there we are. This is how we do it. We'll back it backwards and forwards between each other.
Okay, but a bit of a grassroots movement there.
Yeah, I think possibly the way forward is to connect with other people who have had more success with that. I think chess has obviously had great success at getting it into schools, and there is the aim in the future for the Bridging Schools project to do that. And I think getting those kind of connections and having that kind of research that demonstrates any of those kind of social benefits, long-term benefits, will then hopefully feed into wider government policy agendas.
So we have possibly an even harder question next.
Oh,
which
great.
is, yeah, you're talking about the people. It's an online project, and you're talking about playing bridge online in lockdown and so on. How do we get to the people who are digitally deprived, who don't have internet access? Do we know what was happening to them?
So again, that's the interesting thing about our data. So our data has a lot of the people who participated in our project were also participating in online bridge. But we did collect that data from sort of March, from the first lockdown till December 2020, and what we saw over that time was a change. So we would have some accounts where people would say, "Oh, I'm not playing," and then over time, as the pandemic continued and things got longer and longer, people would then, who had initially been resistant, would then want to start doing it, because obviously this became a longer process that you were stuck at home, for example. But we also have accounts for people who said quite clearly, "I am not engaging in it," because for some it was perhaps not even technological phobia, but there was just everything else was too overwhelming. But at the same time, and I think that's really important to stress here from what our data is also saying, so yes, there will be those who didn't participate because of technological issues for various other reasons that we are not quite sure of, but there were people in our study who highlighted that they weren't playing online bridge because they didn't need to. So this is what's also important to stress, is that there were other activities in people's lives that provided a sense of meaning and connection that was not just bridge. So I think that complicates the idea that perhaps bridge is the solution for everything, but people have very varied lives, very rich lives, and so bridge is perhaps one aspect of many of the other things that they utilized and drew on as part of their routines during the pandemic.
Sorry, just needed to unmute myself there. Thanks, Miriam. So another one from Peter Clinch, who says, "It doesn't strike me that the coincidence of loneliness in an apparently interconnected world is a new one. For example, Olivia Lang's The Lonely City. What is lost is intimacy. Do we underestimate the importance of intimacy?" And he says not sexual intimacy in face-to-face bridge. So I guess that's about the nature of the engagement.
Yes, I think that is probably true, because I think a lot of also the kinds of things that were coming out in our accounts was, and this has been raised in the conference when we were discussing digital bridge as well, is that it has been an absolutely amazing thing for many people, and it has provided this crucial level, as my slide said. A routine is important. Like, there were participants that said online bridge gave me a routine. That's what it did. It gave me that routine. But simultaneously, you will have people saying what they miss are the hugs, are the holding people, is the laughter, is the chat, is that kind of everyday band, which I think, regardless of whether you're a bridge player or not, has been the hardest thing for most people throughout the pandemic. So I think that's also what I'm trying to do, is trying to situate bridge within this broader understanding of the pandemic as well, so that this is situations that everybody is kind of currently living through and finding different ways of managing. And for sure, a lot of that interpersonal intimacy, that friendship, that touch, that communication has been one of the biggest things that we're all losing through, whilst at the same time being sort of connected here right now. For example, I would love to be able to read the room after a presentation. Can't do that now, so I'm having to read the few kind of awkward smiles of the people in front of me. So, you know, a lot of that is lost. So yes, I think that's a valid point, and something I think we're all hoping we will be able to return to at some point.
Sounds like a whole big discussion. Pardon me. There are other questions which maybe people can communicate by email or something like that, but we need to move on. I think we've now got 4 speakers, and each of these 4 has already prepared a pre-recording. And we're hoping that most people will have seen the pre-recording, or you can look at it afterwards. And everybody is going to talk about the role bridge plays in older life and the extent to which ageism is an issue. So our first presenters in this session are Polly Fong and Anne Russell from psychology in the University of Queensland in Australia. Polly is researching social identity, ageing and the role of third places, and she's going to speak first, and then Anne will contribute following that. So off you go, the two of you.
Polly, to unmute.
Sorry about that. So in our study, we found that playing bridge contributed enormously to older people's sense of well-being. Bridge offers older adults, particularly those who have retired, with a routine and a sense of purpose. Being members of a bridge club gives older adults a place to be with other like-minded people. But by far the most interesting thing about playing bridge that we found in our study was the sense of community identity that resides within the bridge club, and it is this sense of identity as a community that keeps and continues to keep the club going, even through a pandemic. Now, Anne, who is president of the bridge club that we studied, is here to talk about ageism and intergenerationality using examples from her club.
Thanks very much, Polly. Yes, it was really interesting during this time. Before this time, there were people having conferences and things, and we've got a large club of over 400 people, and of those people, there are many of them who decided during the pandemic that they really wanted to play bridge and to connect with their friends. And so here's some of our 80 and 90-year-olds. Louise, who was 90 at the time, she decided she wanted to play bridge with her friends and keep in touch with them. And so we worked hard, and she worked at getting on her iPad and playing bridge in our tournaments. We organised tournaments for our club members so that they could have a sense of the club being together and playing together. Helen was in a nursing home, and we organised tournaments for her and her friends so that she could keep in touch with them. And that was a success. We have 3 generations here. Lucas playing with his grandparents and his father at our club before the pandemic. And an interesting case is Paddy, who's 12, and his high school enabled him to select bridge as his sports activity every Wednesday afternoon during the term. And so every Wednesday afternoon he turned up and played with whoever was available. And here he's playing with Ivy against Keith, who's 97, and he really has, his bridge is fantastic, and he didn't phase him coming playing with us, and we really enjoyed having the younger generation playing with us. He was mentored by Therese Tully, who is his great aunt, and some of you may know Therese because she convenes the Gold Coast Congress, and she mentors a number of her great-grand nieces and nephews. Paddy said, bridge is good for strategic thinking and good for social skills. There's a very rigid underlying social etiquette in bridge, and at the same time in life. Playing bridge is very social, and you talk with so many different people out of the mouths of 12-year-olds. For the Gold Coast Congress, Paddy was actually a caddy this day, and he is playing here because someone was sick. So he just played with someone he'd never met before. In the under 50 Master Point competition, he'd been playing a year or two, and they came 5th by the end of the day, which was fantastic. And in the Congress, he played with his 8-year-old sister, and they enjoyed playing. They also turn up at our bridge club on a Saturday afternoon and play together just in our regular duplicate sessions. So that playing bridge is a passion shared around the table across generations of family and friends. And we find that it's really important that they get together. And during the pandemic, we managed to keep the club running and going and people communicating with their friends. But I take your point, Miriam, about the intimacy and what I call the incidental conversations that are missed when it's in this situation, though they certainly keep in touch, which was great. So back to you. Thanks very much, Alison.
That's superb. Thanks, Polly and Anne. So we're doing this particular session at quite high speed. So I'll now introduce JJ Curado from Global Studies, the Open University of Portugal, Madeira, who's researching inclusivity and bridge. Over to
Hi.
you, JJ.
Thank you very much. Well, I perfectly agree, and I think that Anne Brussels and Polly's findings, together with Miriam's, are very, very interesting. I myself do it. I've been a researcher on this field for the past year, so I already started within the pandemic. So mining data is not that easy, but I have some personal experience because I have been a TD for a very long time. And when the pandemic started, I started TDing online with a lot of different clubs from different places in the world. So this is really a global thing. And as Graham yesterday from Real Bridge, Graham Hazel told us, there's also a bit of serendipity in this. There's people moving from the club every day to live face-to-face bridge to online bridge. And the thing was, when we started back in March 2020, I started having free tournaments on BBO twice a week, just to keep the dates open, just to keep our players in Portugal open to the possibility of keeping the same, saving the date, saving the Thursday night and Monday nights for bridge. And we started with younger people. Those were the ones playing more online. And as the time moved on, the older people joined in, and they're now overwhelming the majority of people that play online, both on those sessions and in the evening, but also during the afternoons and during the morning. So it's really very interesting in that point. As for the bridge being ageist, I think if it is ageist, it is in a different way. Well, not in a classical way, as older people are not discriminated against in bridge in general, especially in club bridge. And younger people are not discriminated as well. So bridge, I don't think, is a very ageist game, or there are not a lot of ageist people in bridge. However, I find there's a bit of sexism related to bridge. So you can find older people or people making fun of little old ladies, or not so old, but not from not so old gentlemen. So there is more of a sexist factor than an ageist factor in my findings so far. And I think it's about what I have to say now. I think I'm still in time, but over to the next one. I think it's Chris.
Yeah, I'll get straight in.
Thank you, JJ. That's fine. Okay. So the next speaker is Chris Panagiotaris, who's from social work in Western Sydney University, Australia. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Alison. So as other panelists have very well established, we do have a crisis of loneliness at the moment. There is a breakdown of community, and it's having deeply unsettling effects on our health and well-being. Not sure if my screen's shared at the moment.
We can see it.
You can see it? Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so there is a breakdown of community. It's having deeply unsettling effects on our health and well-being. And we're currently living in a world of hyper-individualism, which makes community quite antithetical to this prevailing ideology. Games like bridge and chess persist precisely because they have communities built around them. And bridge isn't the all-encompassing solution to these problems. That requires a much deeper structural critique. But I do believe that bridge clubs are spaces that can reconfigure community, even if on a small scale. I go into a bit more depth about that in the recorded presentation, but I wanted to talk a bit about young people and linking the intergenerational gap. So I hear regularly this idea that bridge is a dying game, and it can be attributed to the lack of attention span amongst young people. I guess I want to push back on this a little. There are certainly barriers to entry, and these would be really good to explore in the discussions with the other panelists. But my own experience is that young people are incredibly receptive to bridge. Just before I logged on here, I asked my 16-year-old cousin and his friends why they were interested in bridge, and they talked about the joys of problem solving, but the social aspect was also really important for them. Quoting one of them, he said that it's a really nice way to break away from the stresses of school and hang out with friends. Another said that since you're in partnerships, it's fun to have friendly rivalry and competition between these friends. We have a really vibrant youth scene here in Sydney, and there's a great deal of potential if the momentum can be channeled into community development and fostering the intergenerational friendship. I'm at the moment confronted with working out how to best channel this energy and enthusiasm, which is a great problem to have. I've also heard about this idea or this notion that young people are not welcomed by older people in bridge clubs, and this may be true in some instances, but I've spoken to quite a few youth players about this, and this hasn't been our anecdotal experience at all. In my own experience, there was an incredible warmth and generosity when my partner and I turned up to bridge games. Players frequently pointed out how nice it was to see a younger person playing bridge. But linking the intergenerational gap through a shared activity is an endeavour that can create reciprocal benefits for both populations. But I really want to stress about the kind of importance of the unifying interest or the shared activity. Often community is talked about as if it can just be manufactured, but consciously developing community can be artificial and at times pretty absurd. There's a quote here by Harry D'Agostino, which says that chasing community is like chasing happiness. It comes about as a byproduct of a different kind of goal or vision. It's fruitless to aim right at it. So bridge is the unifying interest, and as a byproduct, community and friendship can arise. And I really love that idea, because I guess I'll end with saying that bridge, I adore bridge and the competition of it, but it's beyond the game where I think the true benefits of bridge can be far-reaching. Bridge can be a shared interest between generations, but that provides a gateway into deeper connection and friendship. A friend recently said to me that it's beyond the table where the game, there's hope in the kind of safe communal space built around the bridge table. So yeah, I think bridge presents a really exciting opportunity to increase the thick tapestries of connection that we humans require. Thank you, and I'll throw it back to you, Alison.
Thank you very much, all four of you, for keeping to time particularly. So we now have a comment on that from Marek, and then a comment from Miriam, and then we'll go into some more questions. So Marek, do you want to comment first? You're on mute. You're on mute, Marek. We can't hear you. That's it.
Now?
Yes.
Now it's
okay. Start again.
My comment will be email I've got from one of the participants of my program Bridge 60+, which created 350 bridge clubs all around Poland just for elderly. The mail was, 5 years after the death of my wife, I was sitting at home and waiting for death. Finally, one of my colleagues took me to bridge lessons, and now my life is back again. Probably that's the best comment to loneliness, being socially isolated, and the sense of bridge in at the end of life or in advanced life. And second comment can be a picture I didn't put to this presentation, but in Alzheimer's Center they organize once a year a kind of picnic for families and people with Alzheimer. And we had also bridge play during this picnic. And at one of the tables there was sitting grandmother, Alzheimer infected, his daughter, his granddaughter, and me. And this granddaughter was gold medalist of junior world championship, and she was 18 years old only, playing with grandmother against me and his mother, her mother, and daughter of grand, and and it was normal bridge, even if one of them was Alzheimer infected. So, no more comments.
That's very profound. I think in my field we would say that people are not defined by their Alzheimer's disease. They still have huge capacity, can do loads of things that many people are surprised by. Miriam, do you have your comment?
I think it's basically picking up on what lots of the panelists have already said, Polly and Anne and Chris and Jose. And I think that highlighting the fact, not so much about Bridge being ageist or ageist per se, but the fact that these things around loneliness and Bridge are happening in a wider situation that is a broader problem that's facing us, and that we need to think much more about how we tackle those broader structural issues. And Bridge is really, I suppose, a case study to highlight the ways in which community does flourish, as Chris and Polly's work has demonstrated, and as our own research has shown that, you know, during the pandemic it's provided a way to have important routines, but that we are operating in an incredibly isolating, individualizing environment, and that there are acute issues that we are operating in, and that we need to actually be able to somehow also challenge government policies through our academic lens and highlight that, and not just, I think, provide simple, straightforward solutions that say, oh, well, Bridge is the solution, but actually it's a solution because the world we're currently living in is actually pretty grim for a lot of people. So I think it's hard to be glass half empty, but I think we do need to continually situate that in a broader environment and not always hone in on a micro study as the kind of massive solution, but if that makes sense. I'm basically repeating what everyone else has said.
That's fine. It bears repeating. So what we're doing now is some questions, I think. Marek has his hand up. Did you want to add anything, Marek, to what you said?
Yes, just
okay.
One remark. Coming to government and their engagement in our projects, I was presenting all these ideas to our parliament members and to Senate members, and no response.
Yes, bit of re-education needed. Okay. So I've got some questions that have come in the chat. So the first one is about returning to the issue of discrimination. So it's a question for JJ, and it says, are younger people really not discriminated against in some clubs? There are examples of that in clubs in US and UK, where older people feel threatened by younger people beating them, I say, or feel a little intimidated by young banter. And does anybody on the panel have less positive examples of young people and ageism? Well,
in my experience, no, they're not, because I come from a country where the Bridge Federation is a very small one. We have about 1,000 paying members throughout the country, and this kind of amounts to about 500 regular bridge players at most. So whenever a younger person gets into the club, it's really refreshing, and everybody wants to play with him, and especially against him. We have also something very funny happening in Madeira in the past few years, which was one very experienced player convinced his grandson to play, and they used to play together. And it was very, very beautiful for the later years of this guy's life, that his grandson wanted to play with him and not with the other younger players. The same happened with the father and son, where at some point the father was feeling a bit ill, and the son was really very annoyed because this was one of the few activities they could do together. And he said, and he still says, I'm really very lucky. Nobody else among my friends can play with their parents, and they can practice the same sport, competing with or against each other all the time, and they prefer to play against each other because they're both very competitive. So no, I don't think that younger people are discriminated against in Portugal at the moment.
Yes, and I find that at our club there are a number of mothers and daughters who are playing together, and they really enjoy it. The daughters aren't that young, but they really enjoy it. But also our members recognise that they wish they'd learnt when they were children, and so they really value the idea of the children, grandchildren coming along and playing. Not that we have that many of them, but certainly Paddy and Emmy Rose come along, and people really appreciate the fact that they're learning early and enjoy their company.
Good, thanks, Anne. Miriam?
Hi, yes, it was in relation to the fact that you asked if there were less positive examples. And what we certainly saw in our COVID data was there were some accounts from teachers who were very successful at getting lots of young people playing online, and that was really flourishing. But that the struggle, they said, was moving from being in an environment with their peers to then bridge clubs, which in their experience were putting off a lot of people. And to pick up on Jose's comment about sexism, and something that we're going to talk about in the later panel, in that anecdotally, some of our accounts were highlighting that young women seem to enjoy learning online, so were feeling less threatened and less potential sexist comments coming towards them that they might otherwise encounter in a bridge club environment. So just thought I would flag that up.
Thank you. Okay, perhaps we should move on to another question, and this is one from Tim Rees for Chris, and it's asking about how can intergenerational partnerships be encouraged. And he observes that in your pre-recording it was partly forced because there weren't any alternatives. I guess he's saying people didn't have partners.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. That's a really good question. I will come back to Miriam's point about the importance of bridge clubs and linking the intergenerational gap being somewhat grassroots. Mine was forced. Well, there was a lack of alternatives, but it very much did come about naturally. I don't know how we can kind of foster that and organically, but I do know there are a lot of barriers preventing young people playing bridge at the moment. That is, there is a lot of class connotations associated with bridge, particularly in Sydney. It's associated with a lot of wealthy areas. But I think mainly the biggest problem happening is that young people aren't exposed to bridge. And I think there is an interest there if we can have grassroots outreach programs that occur.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that question about how to promote intergenerational partnerships?
Well, some of it just happened during the COVID, but I teach bridge as well, and we try to encourage people to visit the club and to play at the club. And most of the times it is spontaneous that the older people also invite the younger ones to play. So I feel that I live in a really nice environment. But I think this is also to do with the fact that I work mainly with very competitive bridge, with federation bridge, and not the social kind of bridge, which is, I regret to say, almost disappearing in Portugal. Bridge clubs nowadays are very serious competitive clubs, even at the lower levels of play. So I think it happens more than has to be done, I think. But I think intergenerationality is very, very important. When people from different generations play with each other, they both learn from it, and they forge very nice friendship relationships, like Chris presented this one. It's very good.
Okay, and Marek?
In Poland, we try to link generations on a very special way. It was called Play Bridge with Grandchildren. I obliged all the members of my 350 clubs, Bridge 60+, to teach bridge at least one grandchild. Because question is, who's got better contact with grandchildren than grandparents? It's better contact than parents and children. So, and they have time and they have good relations. So we didn't check effects of this action, but I hope at least 100 new players we have from this action. But that's only one of the ways, of course.
That's very interesting. And of course, you can promote competitive grandparenting, which I'm sure is a phenomenon across the world. I know that. So we've got a comment from David in Yorkshire. Forgive me, I'm looking at my other screen. He says, listening to Chris, picked up bridge as stress busting activity from school. Stress busting is not picked up in targeting, but can be very powerful to the mature working population who've peaked in their careers. We're talking about grandparents and grandchildren. We're maybe not talking about some of the people in between. So I don't know if there's a comment on that. People who are stressed at work in middle age.
Yeah, that was my cousin who mentioned that he plays bridge as a result of just taking away from stress. But I think that's a really good point. That's kind of not sold as a part of bridge, but in an age of this kind of never-ending, constant faux stimulation and entertainment, the kind of release that bridge has, which is through that concentration and intensity of focus. I think that's something that could be a really great selling point. And that kind of focus is critical for maintaining a coherent and autonomous sense of self, but it's something that's not brought up that often.
Okay, and a comment from Miriam.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on that about the fact that yes, there's often this focus on, and our data thus far confirms that, you know, we have a largely older population in our data collection, and then we're going to be working on a Bridging Schools project, which is bringing bridge into schools. So again, it's the older and the younger, and then there's this, where is this middle of a group of people? The problem seems to me, and I am going to put my hand up here and say I'm not a bridge player, is that bridge is a game that takes a lot of time. And so what you have also as a problem here is if you are talking about introducing bridge as a reliever of stress or anything like, you are talking that to a time squeezed middle. And so that's also about the fact that you have an older generation that is time rich, and then you may have younger children in schools, if you get it into schools, who can have it as part of the curriculum. But if you're talking about someone like me to try and play bridge, I would not have the required time for the amount of, you know, the length that it can take. So there might also be a problem, I'm saying this, with the game itself, in that it is so long and so complicated. So I'm going to raise a heretical idea, perhaps, that maybe if there is a concern about the fact that not enough people are playing bridge and we need to get it, you know, more widely known, we need to do something like cricket did and have a much shorter, simpler version for people who might be interested in taking it up where it doesn't take an entire weekend. It's just an idea, but that is a challenge when you're talking about, as Chris and others have pointed out, that we live in a very time compressed, individualized, highly fast capitalist world, to try and have the time to sit down and dedicate the necessary hours for that. That would be my comment.
Fantastic. So very briefly, Anne and JJ want to come in, but we are due a break. So can I ask you to be brief? Maybe Anne first. Okay,
I was just going to say many of our members say that they come and they forget everything else that's happening in their lives when they play bridge. So, you know, they're looking after a spouse that's really ill, and so that's all gone when they're playing bridge because you have to concentrate on it. So definitely a stress reliever once you're playing the game, of course. JJ?
Very, very quickly, Kolu Wen asked a question about systems, and if it were systems that were driving this intergenerationality thing away. When I was a junior and we started playing our complicated systems at 25, they sold us the thing to make us work together was that they asked us to teach the system, the more complicated system and some conventions to the other people. And that really worked well, because that promoted against a new connection between younger and older people. And some people really moved away from their bread and butter bridge to a bit more conventional bridge, but it worked fine. So it's always about selling interactivity.
Brilliant. Well, thanks everybody very much for a brilliant session. So we now have a scheduled break until 11 UK time, different times in other places, but anyway, for the next 5-6 minutes, please take a break and then we'll resume with a panel discussion. Thanks everyone. See you shortly. everyone. It looks like people are coming back in. Just give that a minute to happen. Okay. So on we go, everybody. We're going now into a panel discussion. So all the people who've spoken so far are on the panel, and they're going to discuss the opportunities and challenges regarding intergenerational relations and bridge, building on what we've already done. So the question for the panel then is, what are the opportunities and challenges regarding intergenerational relations and bridge? So we need, I think, a volunteer to start, and then we'll go around the panel for a couple of minutes each. Who'd like to kick that off?
I'm happy to start if you like.
Okay.
So, yep. So it was interesting, you carrying on from what we were talking about before, that during COVID, a number of our members had grandchildren who lived in another state. In fact, someone, you know, we're in Queensland, someone lived in Tasmania, which is a long, long way away. And so they actually had the grandchild playing with them in our tournaments. So the grandchild came in as if they were playing as part of our club. And so that happened with a number of them. And I think in this playing with grandchildren is an opportunity for grandchildren to get together over something that's focused and structured, perhaps in learning bridge. And then they have those incidental conversations that you were talking about. You know, I think that they're so important. I call them incidental conversations that happen, and so they grow that relationship. We could have, as I think it was Jose, or was it Marek, who said that they had the grandchild days, so that we had one event where we had a jigsaw day for grandparents and children, or parents and children, to come along, and the children are down there playing jigsaws and doing jigsaws, and they said, we're in a bridge club, we want to know how to play bridge. So we quickly sat them at the table, and they were playing mini bridge in no time and really enjoying it. And some of them were, you know, really grasped it. Some of the really younger ones were very capable of adding up the cards and playing. So as someone suggested to you, Miriam, that mini bridge is a great way to get started, and get started with your children, and so bring them along to the bridge club, and that's a great way to do it. We have a father and his daughter who come and play, and his daughter's now playing for Queensland in the open competitions, which is great. Number of the youth members are playing at the Queensland Bridge Association every Friday night. They have a pizza and bridge night for youth. And so the youth go along and they learn to play their teachers and mentors there. And they play bridge, and a number of them are now playing for Australia, in fact, representing Australia and certainly representing Queensland. And then they go along to their clubs, and where they can bring their friends, that's another great opportunity. So those are just some thoughts that I had. I'll pass it on to someone else.
Thank you very much, Anne. Who's next?
I can go. I think I'll be picking up on some of the stuff that we've already touched on in the rest of the panel, which is that when we talk about what are the opportunities and challenges regarding the intergenerational aspects of bridge, I think we've touched on a lot of those already, and the one of them is getting more young people to play. I think that's been widely identified as a challenge. And now talking about that middle group of people, those middle-aged people like me, and some of those challenges are not. I mean, I earlier made the allusion that maybe bridge is also the problem. I think part of the challenge is, and again that comes back to things that Polly has been saying and Chris has been saying and I've been saying in our presentations, is that, you know, we're trying to get people to play a game, or engaging in people playing a game in a world that is increasingly time pressed and increasingly isolated and lonely. And these are challenges that are beyond the remit perhaps of this very clever and wonderful panel here, but one that demands slightly more long-term solutions from other kinds of government agencies, etc. Though the pessimist in me sees how effective they've dealt with COVID, and I'm not sure that that's going to be that great either. So I guess there are a lot of challenges to trying to bring bridge intergenerationally. And I also think I just wanted to flag up a question about, whether we see bridge as intergenerational. And I think there is a lot of discussion in the sort of, I've been working on this bridge project for a couple of years, a lot of discussion that bridge is truly an intergenerational game. And a lot of the participants here have talked and shared stories about, grandchildren and parents playing with it. But our data thus far, particularly from the COVID project, if you talk about if intergenerational literally means across all generations, the data that we have does not demonstrate that. Bridge is a game that is played by older people. So in that sense, it is not intergenerational, if that is how we are understanding intergenerationality. If intergenerationality means across different age groups and we can have small numbers, then yes, you can say we have this story here and that case there. But broadly speaking, the trend is that this is a game that is played by an older generation. So I guess my question, to kind of twist that slightly as a sociologist, would be to say, well, if that's the way it is, and yes, we want to get younger people playing, but perhaps we also need to start thinking about, well, we have this fantastic resource of a population, and I think Polly has highlighted in her presentation that we now have more older people living in the world than we have younger people. So actually we have a huge amount of people who potentially could be coming to this game who are time rich. So perhaps we need to think about bringing older people more into the game. So I'm just being slightly provocative, if that's okay.
I'm sure that's good.
I might add a little bit to that.
JJ's next. Are you next?
Just before COVID, we were starting to try to implement a project inviting older people who have time to start to learn bridge, because we had huge support from the Bridge Federation to promote bridge among younger people in schools, and that was a bit hard, because when they start learning bridge, they then move. I live in an island with 250,000 people, and when they want to go to the university, most of them will leave the island, and we will lose them, and we'll lose touch with them. And when they come back, they start dating, marrying, having kids, and we lose them for 20 or 25 years. Some of them will return later. A couple of them will return eventually, but most of them will be lost forever. And now we want to not only bring the young people, but we were starting off bringing their parents and their grandparents and start promoting bridge among them. But then COVID started, so this is a postponed project, but we will definitely go into there. But I agree with Miriam. It is very, very, from that point of view, from that sociological point of view, bridge is very age group targeted at the moment, and we should aim to change that.
Okay, good. I want to give the other panelists a chance to come in, and then I'll maybe come back to Miriam. Or are you absolutely desperate, Miriam?
It was just a comment. I love this idea that we lose bridge players. I just see these people disappearing into the mists of adulthood and they're never found again.
Okay, yeah, nice one. So who's next? Still to hear from Chris and Marek. And I don't know if you wanted to comment, Polly? Didn't get much of a chance earlier. Who's going to come? What? Marek. No.
Me? Okay, so
Polly, I think.
Polly, okay.
Yeah, and then you, if that's okay.
Well, I'm not much of a bridge player. I've only really started to learn with Anne, but I watched Jackie's film Aces and Knaves, and I thought that was fantastic and could really draw in people of all ages into the world of bridge without knowing anything about it. So I think, you know, having more exposure to that kind of medium where you could watch it and, you know, find the intrigue of like cheaters and, you know, all the things that's going on, I think that could really help bring in a wider audience.
Thanks, that's helpful. That's a different and interesting route. Marek, you next?
Yes, about the lost generation, lost forever, like Miriam, you are not lost at all. In Poland, 2 years ago, started an initiative called Bridge to Success. This program or project is addressed to those who just started their professional activity, having families and having no time, theoretically no time to play bridge. We are trying to enter their companies with social bridge program. It's a project stopped by COVID, but we will restart it this year, and probably we will get some people from this middle interval. We have youngsters, we have retired, and this main group which is engaged in professional careers and families. This group is always a problem for all WBF, EBL and other zonal organizations. So this program was presented in Orlando. We will continue, and I will probably put some materials on BAMSA webpage from authors of this program.
Thank you. It sounds as though that'll be very interesting for people. Chris, do you want to have a comment at this point?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, so I guess I'll echo a bit of what's been said, that bridge at the moment is definitely an older person's game, but I don't think it's fundamentally an older person's game in the context. I really feel the highest barrier to entry at the moment is that there's little outreach. And often I've spoken to so many young people and I'll talk about bridge and they're like, what's that? I really feel like the interest is there. And if we look at some of the biggest games in the world right now, they're cooperative based, which is really interesting phenomena. So you've got like Minecraft, Fortnite, and those kind of games which are really cooperative. And I talk to my cousin, keeps my ear to the ground of what's going on, and they often are in Discord chats talking to each other. And I think that social component to gaming is really big. So I think it's there, and I think Janine mentioned in the chat that she watches Pete Hollins, and I think the work that Pete Hollins and people like that are doing by streaming on Twitch and YouTube is a way to get young people interested in this game. I guess one more point about intergenerationality is also that so much teaching now, if we think about pre-industrial society, teaching so often happened generations down, so older people teaching younger people. And there's a really cool phenomena or a cool social enterprise in Sydney, which is called Farm It Forward, and they connect young people who are interested in farming with older landowners, and they try to enhance the cross-generational connection and that ancient practice of passing down knowledge through gardening. And I think Bridge, there's a real big opportunity there, because teaching so often happens now with young people teaching older people because of the rates of technological advancement. That's great, but I think if anything, teaching has historically been older to younger, but that doesn't happen as much anymore. And I think getting older people teaching young people to play bridge, whether that's in schooling or other outreach programs, is another opportunity. Yeah, I just feel like the opportunities in contrast to challenges far outweighs it.
Okay, so every panelist has had a chance to have some input on those really key questions. So we're now going to look at some of the participants' comments and questions. There's a lot going on in the chat, and I know people are kind of looking at it as we go through, but there's a couple of things that we might usefully pick up. So David from Yorkshire is saying, let's be controversial. I really like that. Thanks, David. So he says, bridge in schools is seen as essential for the general future of bridge. In the UK, where bridge is not in the school's curriculum, I see it as generally failed in that objective, as there's no evidence that they come back later in life. But it's essential to promote the high-skilled international player group. So where are the where is the investment in activity in schools going to, and what's going to be its impact in the long term? Any comments on that?
I might have a go at it.
Yeah.
It is a very interesting question. We had a similar problem here in Portugal, but the answer is that nowadays we have a junior national team because of these kind of programs. Some people learned about it when they saw the advertisement in schools. Most of them already had some previous contact, either from their parents, grandparents, family, neighbor, whatever. They already have heard about Bridge, or some of them would, and they would bring some other friends to this and start playing. At least 3 out of the 6 members of the national junior team at the moment, I think 4 of them, came through mini Bridge in schools, not in clubs. So I think something is happening, not in the numbers that we expect, but Bridge is a game of low numbers, or of huge numbers to extract some competitive players, I think. So it's a matter of being patient, I think.
That's helpful, thank you. So another controversial comment from Stephen Hamilton. Okay, he says, I'm finding myself feeling uncomfortable with the underlying premise of this topic, differentiating on the ground of age. People are not homogenous based on their age. So I think he means not everybody's older is like everybody else who's older. I think that's what you mean. And I don't think it helps to say Bridge is an older person's game. So are we talking about the wrong thing? Should we frame things differently? Marek?
Yes, maybe it's a secret, but French Federation will start very special project, Bridge simplified for children 6 to 8 years old, with 40 cards only, and it's promising. Maybe we should go this way. It's not only Bridge, it's not only for old people, even if average age of members in ABOs is very high. Poland is one of the youngest federations and average is 55. In others, it's over 70. But as long as we can start even with kids like 6 to 8 years old, there is a chance for Bridge and to become not only a game of elderly.
Okay, that's good. And I think Miriam is next. You there, Miriam?
Sorry.
Miriam. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I was being so enthusiastic. I wanted to come back to that comment about the controversial comment about feeling uncomfortable about, you know, talking about Bridge being an older person's game. I want to just say, unpack that a little bit, because on the one hand, that sounds, you know, let's you know, as you say, age can vary across the life course, how one feels and how one's chronological age does not necessarily align with how one personally and emotionally feels. These things can be quite different. We know that. On the other hand, we have, as Marek has just demonstrated, there is a sort of statistical empirical basis for the fact that there are older people playing the game. But does it necessarily, and this is the important thing, and this is perhaps the thing that I have found most intriguing about working on this project, is that whilst there is a recognition amongst Bridge players that it is a game played by older people, this is somehow seen as a shameful thing or a problem. And it's a problem because, of course, the end line is that players will die. And so then there's this idea that somehow our older participants are moving towards the end and we don't have anyone coming in. So that's kind of how it's always positioned as a rhetoric to me. So maybe what we need to do is think about a little less about older, and this comes back to the early part of the panel that we were discussing about ageism. I think there is perhaps an inadvertent form of sort of ageism happening within the bridge community that problematizes older age and older players as a problem, if that makes sense. This is a game played by older people, ergo it is a problem. And perhaps we need to really shift that thinking and say older people play bridge, that is not a problem. And going back to your comments on your slides, Alison, which was about how we age well. What does aging well mean? And so rather than thinking of that as a problem, thinking of that as the ways in which, variety of ways in which a larger older population are engaging with a leisure activity that helps them to age well. That was what I wanted to add.
That's great. I think JJ was next, and then Anne, and then I'll ask you a different question. So JJ, please.
No, it's just along the lines of what Miriam just said, and she preempted me. From a bridge perspective, I'm just embarrassed about that. But also a thing of time, as Miriam already told us before. Older people, most of the times, have more time to dedicate to these sort of games. I think that most people my age struggle a lot to find time to play bridge on a regular basis. They have to get up very early to take their kids to school, work the whole day, bring the children home, cook dinner, put them to bed, and then at 9 they will start playing bridge. So in Portugal, most tournaments start after 8:30 in the evening and they'll finish around midnight. And this can be very demanding if you are working and having a professional life. And on the other way, you don't have enough older people that don't have to take care of their grandchildren or sometimes even the children to start playing bridge at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that is also a problem of time, and people. I'm still one of the younger people, one of the younger persons in the room when I direct bridge in competitive field, and I'm 50. On the other way, I have my son, who is now 8 years old, asking me to learn bridge, which is something I tried not to force him to do. So I think there's still hope.
That's good. That's good. And Anne, finally,
yes,
on this particular segment.
Yes, following on from that, we're talking. When we're doing our research, we're doing it with bridge clubs. And I think that it was mentioned earlier that those people that get lost, there are a lot of people who play bridge at university in their lunch hours and spare time. All the time they play bridge. In fact, some of our best bridge players now who are older, playing for Australia, actually started playing bridge when they were at university. So they're not playing bridge in bridge clubs, and the bridge clubs are what we're thinking is where the people are. And then, as JJ just said, they're playing bridge probably in their own time with their friends, and later on when they have time to make the time to go to a bridge club, they will start to play in a bridge club, and then we see them there at that time rather than seeing them now because they're all out there playing. So that's just a thought.
That's great, thank you. And that actually moves us quite naturally into the last question for this session, which is, what role does academic research have in capturing lives and bridge? Sorry, Sam, I changed your wording a little bit, but hey ho. So how could research be useful? What else needs to be done? What are the next research topics? And again, can we start with panel responses? But please, participants, please keep the stuff coming in the chat, and we'll pick up your questions and comments when we've heard briefly from the panel. JJ, do you want to start? The role of research?
Well, on this research topic, I think research is really very important. For starters, because we need to move from this anecdotal register to serious verifiable results. We need to use these results to sell bridge as a tool for well-being and aging well as well, but also to sell it as a fun thing to do. And I think this is something that sometimes we forget. Bridge is supposed to be fun. Even you have to demonstrate that this can be fun, not only by playing, but also through research. It would be very helpful if some of our sociological research would include fun as one of the things to be researched.
That's great. Another panelist on that? I can't see. You're hanging back. And do you want to come in? Sorry, something's frozen.
Polly, do you want to come in?
Okay, can I?
Polly's
Yeah.
coming.
Bonnie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just think generally that adult play groups are severely under-researched, and not only just as leisure activities or as mind sports, but also in particular its links to health and well-being. So as you know, people are living longer and the majority of older adults want to stay living independently. So I think we've only really just scratched the surface of how group-based games like bridge can facilitate aging successfully. And we need more detailed studies to understand the processes by which older adults form social groups to pursue leisure activities like bridge, and the ways in which participation can protect older adults from loneliness and social isolation. And if, as David Scott, I think in session 1A suggests, that doctors should prescribe their patients to play bridge for 6 hours a week, we really need longitudinal or randomized control trial studies that can provide that kind of causal evidence that playing bridge can actually be a remedy to loneliness. And
thank you.
That's it.
Miriam?
Hi, yes. So obviously the question is, you know, what is the role of academic research? And I'm an academic, so I'm likely to go, of course, it's hugely important. But I think there's different things that have been coming up here in the discussion. And so as an academic, I want to reflect on those. And that's academic research that takes apart and highlights, I think, as Chris and Polly have done, the ways in which loneliness and isolation and other wider social factors can be mitigated through, say, for example, bridge. And then there is the advocating and moving forward and recruiting of people to bridge. And those things are not necessarily always going hand in hand with each other. They can, but they can sometimes rub up against each other in different and interesting ways. And you know, Sam and I have had long discussions, and there's a rich, you know, wonderfully rich tradition within feminist scholarship, particularly about the role of advocacy in research and the ways in which advocacy can be used, but also the challenges that makes when you are operating in a research funding environment to access funding, for example, to get and do research on particular things that you may be particularly passionate about. So I guess for me, the role of research is one that is complicated, and we need to think about, you know, ways in which that is going to be funded. Like this research and this BAMSA conference now has been, you know, entirely funded from within the bridge community, which is a fantastic, amazing thing. But that also tells us something about, you know, the involvement of participant users into the research and how those voices need to be taken into account as well. So I think the research is crucially important, but it's a complicated one, and we need to be aware of those different kinds of power dynamics between who is being researched, how they are being researched, the kind of agendas that are being promoted and furthered, and the ways in which that can speak to academic interests as well as ones from within the bridge community. So I suppose that would be my very academic answer.
Okay, I think Marek's next.
Yeah, what I mentioned in my speech, it's to sell results of academic research. They must be sellable, and the more universities we can get to cooperate with BAMSA or my foundation, doesn't matter, with us, it will be the best. I've got Nicolaus Copernicus University at first, Medical Academy in Bydgoszcz, a part of this university, its second university. I have Medical University in Gdańsk, ready to start this immunology research. But it's not enough. We have to engage more. Stirling universities, okay, Maine. We lost a little bit contact with Imperial. Imperial was initially involved in our research. Yes, Samantha? You can confirm, and you can also confirm that we lost contact with Imperial. And it's very important university, this Imperial College, in top 10 universities in the world. So maybe we can use contacts given by Martin Seligman, who is world famous scientist. Pennsylvania University we can get with us probably thanks to him. So the more we get, the stronger our arguments will be and more sellable, and we have to engage media, which is not easy. Our game is not, as yesterday Jan Cabras said, it's not something like tennis or golf, but we have to try. And in Poland, at least, we keep trying. And also to get politicians on our side. Knocking to European community is hopeless by now. We never got any help from them. But probably for this program, 6 to 8 years old, French people will get support from European community. So that's something, step by step, we have to go this way. That's my opinion. Thanks.
That's helpful, thank you. I don't know if Chris or JJ want to say anything about research a little more.
Yeah, I'll be super brief. Yeah, just I totally agree with Polly that there's a huge gap in this area, and academic research is needed to understand both the effects of bridge socially and cognitively. But yeah, I guess I'm more focused on developing initiatives and trying to take more of a praxis lens and work out how we can expose young people to bridge, and then look at how that translates into cross-generational friendship and community development. Yeah, as I said earlier, I kind of reject the hypothesis that young people aren't interested. I think it's a matter of exposure. And yeah, I think grassroots initiatives backed up by academic research provide a really exciting way forward for Bridge.
That's great, thank you. So I think perhaps we should take some participants' comments and questions now. Gosh, a complicated question about schools from Marina Evans, or education, I think. How do we shake off the image amongst most young people that Bridge is boring and for old people? Is online our opportunity, or do we have to get this game on the curriculum so that kids are made to play it and find out for themselves? Yes. Okay, do we make the most of the younger players to market to their peer group? I'm hoping to go into schools next term, and I'm going to approach junior players to take with me.
I could start with a small contribution on this one.
Yeah.
I'm currently finishing a paper on Bridge and entrepreneurship for younger people, using Bridge as a tool for entrepreneurship and education. And we started researching with people that were part of the junior teams in the last 20 years and became very successful entrepreneurs, either in business or in their academic fields as well, because they were not afraid of taking risks anymore. And risk-taking and education for risk-taking is something that can be very helpful in entrepreneurship. So this is something we definitely can also sell to schools and to the education ministers to tell them, well, this is something that you should do not only for the purpose of Bridge, but also for making people a bit more successful in their lives, I mean, their real lives, so to say. So this could be done, and I think this can be promoted as well.
So I'll come to Marek in a minute, but just complementary to that, there's a comment from Esme Nicholson, who says, as a young person who plays mostly for fun and with friends, I feel like the comment that it's an older person's game is just bad press. She says, I agree, we shouldn't see old or young groups who play as homogenous. There are different motivations to play at any age, and we need to figure out how best to tap into them. And agree with Sam about more time online. She says, I've avoided online bridge partially for that reason. Too much time's on Teams, which I think we can perhaps all sympathise with. Yeah, hey ho. Other platforms are of course available, but anyway, Marek, is your hand up again, or is that from before?
No, hand is still on. Oh, no, but
okay, yeah.
I want to add one thing. We are talking about psychology, sociology, medicine,
yeah,
teaching, but it's not the only part of science we can enter. For example, I was asked by economists to give presentation under the title, which I didn't understand at the beginning, Agile Project Management and Bridge. And after studying what's Agile Project Management, I found it similar to Bridge. You know what is Agile Project Management? It's no time to explain now, but try to find it and you will see that it's exactly what Bridge gives to the people. Bill Gates also told about it in his promotion of Bridge.
Brilliant, thank you. Miriam?
Hi, yes. Again, I just wanted to pick up on this idea of touching on how to get it into schools and the ways to attract people. And I think Chris is, doing fantastic work there. And I was also just, as a mother of 2 teenage sons who are gamers, you could indeed try and get them to play bridge, which takes hours, and they spend hours on Fortnite or whatever. You would probably have a fantastic audience of young people that you could access if that was the desire. But my real comment that I want to pick up on is some of the stuff that has been mentioned in chat about this idea that referring to bridge as an old people's game is a problem. I think I'm going to be a little challenging here. That is in and of itself an incredibly ageist remark, because it suggests that old people are somehow not valuable or not part or not doing something that's useful or valuable for them. So I think perhaps as a challenge to the bridge community, of which there are many people here, that instead of seeing bridge as an old person's game as a problem, perhaps as all good activists encourage, say that as a good thing. We have a large amount of people who are older playing this game. How fantastic is that? We also have younger people, maybe not as many as we want, but that's all right, because I think part of one of BAMS's aims is this challenging the image and disrupting the image of bridge. One of those things would be challenging the idea that ageism and referring to other game as old and somehow by extension not worthwhile is part of that challenge. So I would just, perhaps we can think a little bit more that referring to bridge as an older person's game is positive. That would be my comment.
That's a good comment. I can see Anne grinning from ear to ear at that.
It's great comment. And I just wanted to remind us that Kevin Judge said that in Norway, they've got bridge as an A-level subject to be taught to students across Norway online, and it's going to be an A-level subject. So that's a positive thing. The other thing I just wanted to add was, when we approach the politicians to try and get a clubhouse, we're talking to people who've never played bridge. So I think what we need to do is to find politicians who play bridge, and then they will be on our side. And that's just something to think about.
Okay, good. Let me see. I'm just referring back to the chat comments now. Give me a second. Yeah, okay. So David from Yorkshire then goes, so why is bridge in decline then? We're all being terribly positive about it, and he's bringing us back down to earth. I have a bit of a question. Do we know it's in decline? Was there a time when everybody played? I only know it, you know, Agatha Christie novels, everybody seemed to play bridge, but that's another stereotype, of course. Yeah, go on, Mary.
Sorry, I'm just talking the whole time. Yeah, I think this taps into something that Chris mentioned. And this is something that, you know, theoretically I've been pondering in my head, because like you, Alison, as someone who wasn't a bridge player, my understanding of bridge was very much, you know, as it was represented in these cultural stereotypes of the 1950s and 60s as the after dinner party game of choice. And I know my grandmother used to play bridge, and that was the kind of thing that she did, and everybody seemed to be playing bridge. And now we have this thing where it's less culturally out there. And I was thinking about something Chris mentioned about the fact that, you know, we and Polly and I also in my presentation about we live in this incredibly lonely world. And I was thinking that perhaps theoretically this might be something to do with the fact that bridge is a community of four. You're four people, and we are living in a world that is focusing on the individual. We are living in a time of heightened individualism, so which is almost antithetical to the game. So if you are living in a world that literally, and your time and your way of spending it is all about developing you as an individual. So I was wondering once, and I've had this conversation with Sam, whether we could theorize an understanding of bridge and the decline of bridge as also reflective of the decline in sort of more collectivist communitarian understandings and theories and rise of more increased individualism, and so that game is reflective of that shift that we're having in parts of the global north and the global south. So that was a thought. You're muted, Alison.
Thank you. You didn't hear the small sweary word just then. I'm seeing in the chat that people are absolutely convincing me it is in decline. JJ, do you have perhaps a final comment on that, and then we towards wrapping up?
Again, my experience is a bit different, but I know for a fact that there are less people playing outside of serious bridge. So social bridge, casual bridge is in huge decline, and from a general perspective, from what we knew about people not playing at the club, but that we knew that were playing at the clubs in the federation, in the Portuguese federation, it is not. It's been fairly constant for the past 30 years or something. I've been affiliated for 30 years now, and I can tell you which number we're about now just by multiplying the number of years of affiliation by 100. Every year there's 100 people coming in and about 100 coming out. So we're being very stable numbers, simple numbered. We were about 800 players in 1991, and now we are about 1,000 players. So it's very, very stable from this competitive perspective.
Yeah, maybe I suppose there's different universities of bridge out there. Oh, anyway. Yeah, very interesting, of course, especially to me as a social scientist. Anyway, yes, so, well, what a morning. What fantastically interesting discussions. I just thought I'd end by picking out one or two little take-homes that I shall certainly take home. I don't know if there'll be take-homes for you. I think there's a few of these. One, I suppose, is the whole issue of ageism, challenging ageism. How is ageism coming into play? Are we reflecting ageism in the way that we're thinking about bridge ourselves? I think that's quite an important question. Another take home, I thought, is the idea of 2020 bridge. If people ever have seen 2020 cricket, they'll know the incredible excitement that engenders amongst the audiences. It's just a massive thing. And I was trying to think of a bridge equivalent. To be honest, I can't quite imagine it, but maybe that's an interesting proposition. I love the idea of adult play groups. I think that was Polly's phrase. And that, of course, goes way beyond bridge, but is quite a key question in the field of research in aging. We mentioned at one point the challenge of how to get the message out there beyond the bridge community, and somebody came up with the idea of a more grassroots movement, getting the people who are actually involved out there a whole lot more, getting them engaged in some kind of campaign. Really like that. Another thing was, and this I guess is exemplified in this conference, the importance of international learning. As we've all said, it's very hard going on your own. It's very difficult to get funding, etc., etc. That's true across the world, but international learning, international collaboration makes us all, I think, more than the sum of our individual parts, as does, and this is my final point, I think the point that Marek raised about the different disciplinary fields that this research can touch on, and the way that it can become a focus for multidisciplinarity, which is something that many funders are currently promoting. And maybe we should think perhaps not so much how do we get Bridge out there, but how do we advance multidisciplinary research, and is Bridge a good example through which to do that? So you win on both counts, you win on what the funders want, and you win on what the Bridge community wants. So thank you all very much, particularly panelists, participants, everybody, for a really stimulating and interesting discussion. We've put up the closing slide just to remind everybody about the rest of the conference, what's going on. And here, at least, it's lunchtime. So if it's not lunchtime with you, you have my sympathies. It may be bedtime.
It's bedtime for
thanks,
us.
everybody. And
bedtime for us.
Look forward. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sleep well, everybody. And look forward to the upcoming conference sessions. And it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you all. So thank you very much and goodbye.
Bye.